Gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 22 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. Cannot thank you enough for tuning in tonight. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us here on this Monday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 Pacific, where the voice of the San Jose Sharks, Randy Hahn, is. Randy, how are you, and how is everything going with your shelter in place?
I'm doing fine. It's been an unusual 4 months for everybody, obviously, but hanging in there and trying to make the best of an unusual situation. But actually, so far, so good.
Good, yeah. Well, it's funny because I see that you're keeping hydrated and you're also keeping you're stuffing yourself a little bit there. I love it with quaran dining and. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing there because every night I see it's something different. It looks fantastic.
Well, living in this area, in the San Jose, Silicon Valley area for almost 30 years, you make a lot of friends and you make friends in the restaurant industry, and thought it would be a nice way to kind of help people in that industry who were really hurting at the very beginning when everything was shut down and you couldn't even do takeout in some of these places. And I thought once the takeout option was available that I would start taking out food from the places that are owned by friends of mine around where I live and in the area that have supported me over the years and hosted me at their restaurants many times, and tried to do a little bit of exposure for them, a little bit of a review, but I can assure you they were always positive reviews because I eat good food. So these places all have good stuff, and it's just been fun every week or two picking another place and just in whatever way I can, helping the restaurants out in our area. Now they're starting to open up. Patio dining is opening. So there's fewer restrictions on some of those places. And it's getting a little easier, but it was a rough 3-4 months, obviously, for people in that industry.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, and again, just to let everyone know, for those that are just tuning in for the first time in Randy's area, in the San Jose area, Randy doesn't have a lot of ties with the East Coast, but the biggest reason, actually, Randy, I'm going to tell you this: 6 years ago, because out here on Long Island, where I am, I've been a big admirer of you and your work. Ever since 2008, actually. And we had met back in 2014, the 2014-15 season at the Nassau Coliseum when you were walking into the Coliseum for a morning skate. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, again, all 21 guests, including your radio counterpart, Dan Rusanowski, was born out here. But you gave me the time to walk with you and listen to what I was doing in my career or in, aspiring sportscaster, and you took the time to listen. So I really do appreciate it. And 6 years later, I wanted to thank you for, taking the time out to listen to me, because I was the only one in a group of about, I think, 10 people or 10 fans to run to you and just say, hey, how are you? And everything along those lines. So thank you 6 years later.
Well, my pleasure. I was that same young aspiring broadcaster a long time ago, and when people were kind to me and offered some time to me, that's the most valuable thing you can give people. I always appreciate it, and and said to myself, if I ever had the opportunity to pay it forward in the future, I would do that. So, my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So let's get to business and who Randy Hahn is outside of the Sharks Media Guide. So, Randy, you were born in Edmonton, Alberta, and in Canada. And you got your start, and tell me if this is right here. You got your start at 16 years old calling dog sled competitions in the Yukon territory. That is something, and one extreme from another, from hockey to dog sled, or vice versa.
Yeah, it was a kind of a roundabout thing. I was very fortunate when I was 15 years old and I was in high school to get a part-time job at one of the radio stations in the town where I lived, Whitehorse, which is on the Alaska Highway. Small town, 18,000 people, 2 radio stations. And my neighbor happened to work at one of them and said they were looking for a part-timer type kid to just work behind the scenes and clean up and move stuff around. And that led to eventually getting on the radio. And then the next year in that town, they have a winter carnival called Sourdough Rendezvous every February. And the main event of the carnival is the dog sled race on the Yukon River. And there was a start finish line guy, and they needed somebody up on a perch about 2 miles down the course to kind of have a bird's eye view to offer some play-by-play and some commentary from up there. I had a native Canadian native chief with me who was very familiar with the sport. I wasn't. And he was my color guy. And as my dear friend Bob Miller, now in the Hockey Hall of Fame, the former LA Kings voice, said, you didn't really do the play-by-play. It was the paw-by-paw. But yeah, that was how I got my start. That's the first event that I ever did. And I'm probably going to hold that record. Maybe as long as Wayne Gretzky will hold his scoring records, I'll have the record for being the only NHL announcer who started doing the paw-by-paw.
That really is unbelievable. But also, you are not, you've done other sports as well. You've called the FIFA World Cup, 1990, 91, the Women's World Cup, 94, I believe also was the World Cup. I want to say here in, I think Texas somewhere. I think that's where it was.
The U.S. hosted the World Cup.
Right, the U.S. U.S. Yeah, right. So tell us a little bit about that and how the transition from soccer to hockey was, a big one, especially for a broadcaster. I can't even imagine going from soccer to hockey, something so much quicker.
Well, as you can imagine, in Canada, working in the NHL is the top of the sportscasting food chain. It is akin to what the NFL is in this country. They are the plum jobs. They don't just show up very often, and you don't start out working in the NHL. So my start doing play-by-play after the dog sled race was actually in indoor soccer. Okay. Initially, the MISL, Major Indoor Soccer League, and for a while, the NASL had an indoor league as well. And I went to college in Vancouver, was working as a sportscaster there, but then got an opportunity to move to Edmonton to do my first television job. And it was while I was there that I got the play-by-play job for the Edmonton Drillers. They were an indoor soccer team in the NASL and MISL. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth doing play-by-play. And if you've ever watched indoor soccer, it's very much like hockey. It's on the same surface, just with a carpet put over the ice. 3 forwards, 2 defenders, and a goalkeeper. And that's the same configuration, of course, as hockey. So that's where I kind of got my reps in and my play-by-play background. And then I did outdoor soccer, as you said, a couple of the World Cups, which just a tremendous events to be able to be involved in Italy, US. I also, as you mentioned, did the first Women's World Cup in China, also the World Cup in Korea, Japan in 2002. So I did a lot of soccer, but I think in the back of my mind, my goal was to get into the NHL. I eventually was living in San Diego and got an opportunity with a channel called Prime Ticket in Los Angeles when Wayne Gretzky was with the Kings to be their pre-game, intermission, and post-game host. So that was my first real big break into the NHL. And I did that for a couple of years with Prime Ticket. And then eventually, through a circuitous route, I ended up getting the play-by-play job with the Sharks, which is another whole story. But that's kind of how the transition went. And for as long as I could, I juggled soccer and hockey simultaneously, but it became more and more difficult. I was the first television voice for the Kansas City. They were called the Wiz when they first came into MLS. They're now FC Kansas City, but I was their first TV voice. But eventually it became harder and harder to do both leagues because of the overlap.
Right. Yeah. And that was actually the next thing I was going to bring up was the overlap, because if I'm not mistaken, you were also from 91 to 94 in that range. You were also in Chicago on Sports Channel, which eventually was bought out by Comcast and NBC. You did college basketball, baseball, volleyball, if I'm not mistaken, too, gymnastics, if I read that right. Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
So how was that?
Well, that was great because I got to do a bunch of things that I'd never done before. I mean, who's ever done gymnastics until you do gymnastics? It's just not a thing that on high school or college radio that you would encounter. So that was great. You just throw yourself in and try something brand new. And it was the same for baseball. Been to a million baseball games in my life. I, in fact, was the backup PA announcer for the San Diego Padres for a number of years. Wow. Back in the 90s and 80s when some of their stars were like Steve Garvey and Tony Gwynn. So I was very connected to the sport, but I'd never done play-by-play of a baseball game. Well, you think you know how to do it until you try and do it, and then it becomes another whole animal. So I was anxious to try a lot of different things. College basketball was another thing that I had never done before. But being at Sports Channel in Chicago, who owned a lot of those properties, especially the college properties, I got the opportunity to do a lot of that. I did University of Illinois Chicago hockey games with Darren Pang, who was just
Oh yeah.
starting as a commentator back in those days and coming out of being a player. So that was a great time living in Chicago. I was commuting once I got the Sharks job from Chicago to San Jose for about 8 years, and then eventually permanently relocated to the Bay Area, where I've been now ever since.
Yeah, and not only that, but also your roots in terms of with the Sharks, it goes all the way back to the team's inception in '91. So now, for those that have watched The Last Dance, we go from back here all the way back here. So that's what we'll do here with Randy. So you became a San Jose resident, and also you were a part of a corporation called Pro Hockey San Jose. Give us a little bit of background about that and how you were one of the crew to get the Sharks into the Bay Area.
Well, I got married in San Diego in the 80s, and my wife at the time got a job in television here in San Jose. And we moved up, and I was going to commute back and forth to San Diego, continuing to do the San Diego Sockers and eventually the LA Kings prime ticket gig. And while we were just relocating, the city of San Jose voted to build the arena, which is now SAP Center. And back in those days, the late 80s, the feeling was that the Warriors would move to San Jose. The Oakland Coliseum Arena, which they've now since left, back in those days was run down, much in the way that the Long Island Coliseum became before it was renovated. It was just not a nice place anymore, and the Warriors wanted it to either be upgraded significantly or they were going to move, and everybody thought they were going to move to San Jose, except us. There was a group of us who were hockey followers here in the San Jose area, a couple of attorneys and myself. And we were always of the mind that the Warriors would kind of leverage the existence of the new arena in San Jose to get what they wanted in Oakland. And that, in fact, is exactly what happened. So we turned the tide with the city of San Jose once the building was under construction with this group we formed. Initially, we called it NHL Hockey San Jose until the NHL told us to cease and desist using their trademark name. But that was part of the reason we did that. We wanted to get noticed. And then we changed it to Pro Hockey San Jose. We became a lobbying group. And we also attracted an ownership group that eventually, through a series of events, became the owners of the San Jose Sharks. So we kind of were that grassroots group. We put flyers on people's windshields at 49er games. And when there were NHL exhibition games at the old Oakland Coliseum, we'd set up a booth and talk to people about bringing the NHL to San Jose. And then once we got the mayor and the city council of San Jose on board, then it started to become a serious thing. They started to become interested in what it would be like to have an NHL team for San Jose. And of course, here we are almost 30 years later, and it's been a huge success.
Yeah, I was gonna say beyond a huge success, but also, Randy, you've called 1,500 games and counting. Obviously over 1,500 games. You called your 1,500th game on January 16th, 2016 against Dallas. Now to be in the same category as like a Patrick Marleau or a Joe Thornton, where they have 1,000+ games or points or whatever the case may be. And Randy Hahn here has 1,500 games under his belt. What is that feeling like for you, and how humbled, honored do you feel to have 1,500 and continuously going for that?
Well, number one, I'm lucky and grateful that no one who I work for has ever figured out that they should get rid of me. So it's been nice to hold down the same job for 29 years. I'll say that. It's a great feeling, and those of us who do what we do, it's an interesting position, because the longer you're in it, the more attached the fan base becomes to your sound, your voice, your personality, and then it becomes difficult for anyone to imagine getting rid of you, because all of a sudden the fans are going to be upset in a case where somebody's been around for 25 years. I revert back to Bob Miller when he retired as the voice of the Kings. I mean, that was a real big thing for Kings fans, because if you were in your 40s or 50s, and Bob was the voice of the King for 40 years. I mean, your whole life of being a hockey fan, you heard that voice on TV, and then for it to all of a sudden go away is very shocking. So I'm very fortunate, very lucky. I work for a great owner in Hasso Plattner, who's just been tremendous when the good times were good, and especially now when things aren't going good. He's just taking care of everybody in our organization and wrapping his arms around the part-time employees in our building and things like that. So it's gratifying. It's a crazy number, I think. If we play a whole season next year, it'll be the season after that I hit 2,000 games, and it's hard to believe, but I guess I was able to figure out a way to get to work on time 2,000 times.
Exactly, that's true. Now, obviously, you've been doing this for, as we said, over 1,500 times. Now, a typical game day for Randy Hahn. Take us through what you would normally do, your preparation. As a hockey broadcaster. I remember we had asked Dan Rusanowski this, and obviously after his accident, he would stay at the arena for all the time. So let's hear your side of the story going to a Sharks game.
Well, the routines are a little different if you're at home and on the road, obviously, because if you're on the road, you're working out of a hotel room, and you're in some ways more prepared because the whole reason you're where you are is for the game. When you're at home, there's the other things in your life that are swirling on around you, whether it's family or friends or things that come up. So it's a little different. But for a typical home game, if I'm going to the morning skate, and I don't always go, but obviously a lot of preparation has gone into it ahead of time, the days and night before, and just the ongoing, reading up on the league and staying current with everything that's going on and watching highlights. But, I'll go to morning skate here in San Jose at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'll watch the Sharks skate. And then if I haven't seen the other team that season yet, I'll typically go to the other team's morning skate. Unfortunately, the Sharks skate at a practice facility and the visitors skate at SAP. So it's a commute to get to the two morning skates. Right. But I'll go to both of those and, talk to some players and hear from the coach and gather some tidbits from the other announcers. It's, we all trade information, and it's a great resource to have friends around the league to broadcast to the other teams, to give you a little ins and outs about what's going on with their team that you might not have read online. And then I'll try and get a workout in the afternoon, go for a run here. And we're so lucky in California, you can certainly run 12 months a year. It might be raining in the winter, but that's about it. So that's a nice advantage. And then I'll go back to the arena by about 4 o'clock. I'll turn on the Eastern games, which are coming on at 4 Pacific, start watching hockey while I'm working on my notes. And then by 5:30, I'm in a production meeting. And by 6 o'clock, I'm up in the broadcast booth and going through rehearsals and getting myself in position and getting ready for a 7:30 game. So that's kind of a typical day. It's strange for people who don't do what we do, because the average job that most people have that isn't in this industry, you get up in the morning at 6, 7 o'clock, you have breakfast, and you go to work at 8 or 9 o'clock. And then at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, you jump on the train or get in your car and you go back home and you're done for the day. Well, on game days, I'm up at 7 or so in the morning and going to a morning skate, but I don't really work until the last hours of my day. So you kind of have to pace yourself, because you have to be at your best between 7:30 and 10:30 at night, whereas most people by then are dialing it down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You said that perfectly, because I can definitely relate to making sure and pacing yourself throughout the day. It can and especially when you don't, and it's not a good call, and then it's just not good for the audience, or not good for yourself.
Well, often the game dictates that too. I mean, I've done games where I've been dead tired, and all of a sudden it's an awesome game and adrenaline kicks in, and it's no problem. You get through it. But there's other times when you're traveling or just sick or tired or whatever, and then the game ends up being, 1-0, right? And a slow affair, or maybe it was penalty filled but still no goals. Those ones can drag you down, but that's just part of the process, and there's very few of those.
Absolutely. So now, you were bringing up before, you go for a run, and Randy, we've seen you post all the time on Twitter, on Instagram, about you going on a run, and going in different cities. I know out here on Long Island, I wish that you wouldn't be running in Hempstead, because there's really no place to run. But when you're in Brooklyn, obviously you can run wherever. You could run at the Garden or wherever the case may be. But When you come out here or even on the road, what is your favorite spot to run, if you will?
Well, it's hard to nail down one. If you had to ask me 100% the best one, my favorite would be the seawall at Stanley Park in Vancouver. It's absolutely spectacular. It's about a 7 or 8 mile run, and for about 6.5 miles of that, you're running alongside the ocean and looking at beautiful mountains. So it's number one. There's lots of other great runs, though. I love running on Bayshore in Tampa, again along the water. Central Park, I mean, that's iconic. And even the West Shore Highway run in Manhattan, when we've stayed in Lower Manhattan before, I really enjoy that run and jutting out onto the little piers that go out from the sidewalk there. That's one I did. I've done a lot. Not this last season when we were in Long Island, but the year before that, I ran around the campus of Hofstra. So done that. I can check that off my list. Chicago, lakefront, obviously a spectacular place.
Yeah.
Arizona, there's so many great places that we travel to in the league. And, even in LA, when I get the chance to go down to the beach in Santa Monica, that's always a fun place to run to. There's lots of them, but Stanley Park is definitely number one.
Definitely number one. That's definitely, I got to get, when I get out there, I definitely have to do that at some point. So now you were talking about Los Angeles, and I've seen you, Randy, call, you've gotten the call on NBCSN a few times. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a couple of times where you had Jim Fox as your color commentator. Now, because you go from obviously now with Brett Hedican and Jamie Baker, and sometimes you switch off. I had asked Dan this question. Now I'm going to ask you this. Whenever they swap, or in the beginning when Drew left and he went to Edmonton, Drew Remenda went to Edmonton. How difficult of a transition was that for you as a play-by-play broadcaster to make that immediate switch?
Well, it might not have appeared as tough as it was. It was tough losing Drew because, in this business, when two broadcasters have chemistry and a play-by-play color kind of setup, and by that, I mean chemistry among themselves and with the viewers, it's pretty special. And Drew and I, over 13 years, had developed quite a chemistry. I mean, it's something we felt after about 2 years. And then we could tell the fans really enjoyed the approach we took to broadcasting the games. And you have to keep in mind, I mean, and this is going back almost 20 years now when he and I started together. This is not a traditional hockey market. This is an expansion market. The sport was around here in various forms before, and the old California Seals existed in the NHL back in the 60s, but this was not a hockey area by any stretch of the imagination. And what works on a broadcast in California for fans who maybe want to be as entertained by the announcers as they want to be entertained by the game won't work in Toronto, or maybe won't even work in New York, much more traditional, sophisticated hockey markets. So our approach was a little more whimsical sometimes, and we would get off on tangents and try and crack each other up. And the kind of relationship we had with the viewer, I think, was that it always felt like there were three people in the room, Drew, me, and the viewer, and we were all in on the inside jokes. And people seemed to appreciate that and grow into liking that. So when Drew left, for the Oilers, it was big, and it took a while to develop that chemistry. And now, as the Sharks have elected to rotate Jamie Baker and Brett Hedican into the TV analyst chair, it's great because I think the fans are getting two different perspectives from two different guys. One guy who was a Stanley Cup winning defenseman in Hedican, and another guy who was a fourth liner who fought his way to craft a really nice 10-year or so career in the NHL, Jamie Baker. For me, it was just getting used to each of them, us getting our own chemistry. And we're so used to it now that, we know the other's sense of humors and things like that. And it's fun. And then every once in a while, we do the triple cast where there's all three of us, and then we have a ball. So it's really a lot of fun. And it was a transition, though, at the beginning, but certainly isn't an obstacle in any way anymore.
All right. Well, that's good. Yeah. Now, right now, actually, originally I had brought up with NBCSN. Now, when you get that call, there are times when you are, or most of the time, you have Brett by your side or inside the glass. But then there's that rare occurrence where you would have another person, such as the aforementioned Jim Fox. Now,
Right.
because he works with Alex Foss down in Fox Sports West, and he took Bob Miller's seat. But when you haven't worked with him for a long time. How difficult is that transition for you when you're going from Jamie or Brett to now Jim on a national stage?
Well, first of all, when you're doing a national game involving your own team, there's an inherent challenge built right into that, that you have to dial your slant. I'm not going to make any apologies when I'm doing an NBC California game of a Sharks home game or road game, one of our Sharks telecasts. I'm leaning toward the Sharks. I mean, I want the Sharks to win. I want them to do well. It matters to me that they're successful. But once you're on that national stage, I think it's incumbent on the broadcasters to play it a lot more down the middle. And that becomes even harder when it's, say, Brett Hedican and I doing an NBCSN game of the Sharks versus Vegas. Another of our big rivals. But lately, the folks at NBC have, when they can, scheduled, for example, if it's a Sharks LA game, as you alluded to, me doing the play-by-play and Jim Fox doing the colors. So you get a person from each team. There was another game this year where Alex Faust did the play-by-play, Jamie Baker did the color. So you had that element from both teams. And I was surprised how easy it was working with Jim Fox. Maybe it's because I've known him for so long, even going back to when I worked for the Kings and he was still playing, and having had him in our division and watched his work for many, many years and appreciated him. When we sat down in the booth, it was like hand in glove. It was a really good feeling. That hasn't been the case for all the guys I've worked with that aren't on my team. But, we all kind of have a style and a way of doing things. And I watch other broadcasts all the time. So I sort of have a sense for what guys like and how they do things. And I'm kind of getting used to that, and also trying to do as good a job as I can of when a national game involves the Sharks to try and not be too pro Sharks, because that drives the other team's fan base crazy when they're watching. I don't think I can ever win really when doing a Kings game or a Vegas game, because I will bend over backwards to be pro Vegas or pro LA, and they still call me a stinking homer.
Wow, that's unfortunate, I guess. That's wild.
Just the way fans are. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's
true. I can definitely attest to that as a fan myself sometimes. But now, with you being a Sharks homer, as you had alluded to with some of the fans, you were actually recognized, Randy, as one of 5 employees still remaining with the Sharks during the 25th year anniversary. You were recognized as one of 5 to still be with the team 25 years later. Your radio counterpart, Dan Rusanowski, was another one. He was the second one. Now, again, one of just 5, and you are one of them. Talk about what that means to you 25 years later.
Well, it's remarkable again to me. So many people have passed through the doors over the years, and somehow Dan and I mean, he was the original radio voice. I was not the original TV voice. I was used on a part-time basis in the first 2 years. Joe Starkey, who's probably most famous for arguably the most famous call in college football when the band came on the field in the game between Cal and Stanford. He was the original Sharks TV voice, but he had so many other things going on. He did 49ers as well, that he had to miss games, and I filled for those games. So I was around in the first 2 years from the very beginning. And of course, we talked about that role I had with the support group to try and get the franchise going. It's just, when I got involved in that group 3 or 4 years before the Sharks ever existed, my hope was to, maybe I can create a job for myself if a team ever comes here.
Right.
And here I am 30 years later, and that's exactly what happened. and to be able to stick through all the ups and downs. We've had 2 or 3 changes in ownership. We've moved from various different TV stations. Those are all possible minefields for announcers, because all you need is one highly positioned person in the organization that's in charge of broadcast that doesn't like your act or thinks that they can find better, and you can be out of a job. So I've been very fortunate to sidestep the minefields and the hand grenades once in a while, and also learn that, you know, when you're a local broadcaster, you work for many different people. You work for the TV station, you work for the ownership of the team, the general manager cares about what you say, the coach cares about what you say, the players and their wives certainly care about what you say, and perhaps most importantly, the fans care about what you say. So you have to find a way to try and keep everybody in that large group happy. That's a challenge, and it's something I'm proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, again, in our industry, I could completely relate to some fans with college basketball out here. I do Northeast Conference games and some Big East games for St. John's and Seton Hall, and I've heard one bad game before from the SID telling me that it was not a good game, but we'll get them next time. And the fan reaction was horrendous. So I know exactly how that is. And in the New York area, it's absolutely brutal because, it's almost like you want to just put your head into sand and never come out and show your face again. It's tough.
Don't read Twitter.
Yeah. Oh God, no, that's brutal.
Just get off it.
Yeah, exactly. Get off social media in total. But now there are times again where you've had up and down in games and stuff like that. But you've also been recognized, Randy, 8 times, NorCal Emmy Award in the on-camera talent play-by-play category. Again, another honor for you. Talk about that and being honored not once, not twice. Fast forward all the way to 8 times.
Well, and this is going to sound cliche-ish, like a player when he wins an MVP award or something, but it really is a reflection of a big group of people. When you're doing radio, and most of us that do play-by-play started in radio, and I did, you're kind of a one-man band. When I was doing indoor soccer play-by-play on radio, I traveled my own equipment. I set it up. I engineered my own show. I even did my own talk show with taking calls all by myself without an engineer or producer or anything. And it's sink or swim. If you do a good job, it's going to be a good broadcast. And if you aren't prepared, it's not going to be good. Well, in TV, it couldn't be more opposite. There's 30 or 40 people, camera people, audio people, producers, directors, graphics coordinators, master control people, lighting people, audio. There's just so many people that come together to make what a broadcast is. To be singled out for your work is really a little bit unfair, because without all that working in concert, it wouldn't make me look good. They make me look good. And, in those situations, I feel more like our telecast was honored rather than me individually. We have a great crew out here. If you spend some time, if you're a hockey fan, and watch the regional packages of on the NHL Center Ice and watch the regional shows, I will put our broadcast up against any broadcast in the league as far as technical innovation, the way the game is covered. So we have some really, really talented people here. They all work on Giants and A's baseball. They do Warriors games. They're doing MLS. Many of them do network NFL games on Sundays. They fly all over the country because they're that good at what they do. So I'm just blessed to be surrounded by outstanding people in that field, and that just makes me look good. And, that's a byproduct of that.
A very selfless attitude. I love it. Yeah. So now you've also done, actually, you were the play-by-play voice for the 2K series many years ago. Well, not many years ago. Wow. I'm outdating myself. That's brutal.
It was a while ago.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? Now that we're on this, where you're in shelter in place, New York pause, it's 2020 still, and it's only June 15th. My goodness. You completely lost count of the days, but 2K9, 2K10, 2K11, you were the play-by-play voice. Now talk about the work that gets put into calling a video game and to be the voice of a video game. 3 years in a row.
It was way more than I thought it was going to be. I'll be honest with you. The first And the way that worked was the majority of the work was done the first year. And then in year two, we spent probably 30 hours in the studio to update it. And then in year three, another 30 hours in the studio. But year one took about 125 hours. So that was a lot of trips to the studio. And we would only do it at the most 5 hours at a time, because after that, your voice starts to give out. And fortunate that the recording studio was here in the Bay Area, which probably helped them make the decision that year to use me, because they didn't have to bring me in for 3 weeks to do it. I could just commute from back at home. But I don't know what it's like now, because I haven't done a video game like from scratch again, probably in about 5 or 6 years. And maybe they've been able to shorten that time span of how much it takes to lay down all that information. But I remember the first one I did, which was NHL Blades of Steel. It was the remake of Blades of Steel. And at that time, the company that was making it, Konami, which was a gaming company, they made it in two formats. They made it in a Nintendo 64 format, if you remember that cartridge, and then they made it in the original PlayStation, CD-ROM disc type of format. Right. And the amount of memory that the PlayStation disc had was way more than the N64 cartridge had. So when we were recording the play-by-play for N64, it would be he shoots his cars. Everything had to be quick, because they wanted to jam as much data onto the cartridge as you could. And then for PlayStation, it was he shoots, he scores. You could stretch it all out and spend more time. But it was very involving in the 2K series. Great people to work with, and they were very professional. But it was painstaking work. And as I said, 125 hours divided by 5. You do the math. I was making, 25, 30 trips to that studio in order to do that first year. So it was more than I thought I was taking on, but still a lot of fun to be able to go home and your kids were playing video games with all their buddies that their dad was the voice of. So that was pretty cool.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, because, you come home and you say to yourself, wait a minute, I know that voice. I'm hearing it in the kitchen, but I'm also hearing it on the Xbox 360. That's fantastic. I think that's honestly the coolest thing. But you also worked for Arena Football, if I'm not mistaken, on Fox Sports Net. Talk about your time there in the other category.
Right here in the Bay Area. It was an off-season opportunity that was offered me by, at that time, they were Sports Channel Bay Area, but now NBC Sports California and NBC Sports Bay Area. And they carried the San Jose SaberCats games. And the SaberCats were the juggernaut of that league. I can't remember how many championships they won, but I think in a period of 10 years, they won the Arena League like 6 times. So they were really good. And, they had a top quarterback, really good coach, and ownership that was willing to spend whatever it took. And they offered me the opportunity to do the play-by-play of that for a couple of seasons. I worked with Mike Pulaski, who was a fairly good college quarterback and played a bit in the NFL as well, and had never done football before. So, again, dipping my toes into something that I hadn't done before. It was a lot of fun, and met a lot of players that I had forgotten about, because when I was in San Diego, I was the pregame and halftime and postgame host for the San Diego Chargers for a long time. I did the Dan Fouts show, the Don Coryell show back in that era in the 80s, and had been around the NFL a lot. But then a lot of time passed where I hadn't been around football players, and it reminded me, being back in the Arena League, how much I missed being around guys from football. For me, the football guys and the hockey guys are top notch. Not to disparage the guys in the other sports, but in all the leagues I've worked in, those guys were always the best, and gave you the time of day.
That's really amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Especially giving the time of day. Hockey and football, that in my experience is for sure top notch. Now going back to what we were talking about earlier, with the travel when you were in Chicago, was there any problem ever with crossover season? With when you did baseball at times, or you did college basketball, but then you also had the Sharks too. And you were saying earlier that you were traveling back and forth for, if I'm not mistaken, 8 years.
Yeah, I commuted from Chicago for 8 years. So the Sharks were my priority. But back in those days, the Sharks didn't televise all the games. I would have been over 2,000 games a long time ago, but probably for the first 10 years, the Sharks only did up to 60 games a year out of 82. They just didn't have the demand for a a full package of live games in those days.
Right.
They would even have some of their games tape delayed. When we were on the East Coast, say playing the Islanders, a 7:30 game in New York. Well, that's 4:30 in the afternoon here. People aren't home from work, so they would delay even showing the game until 6 or 7 at night, so that people could actually see it. But that's a different time. Everything has to be live now, or people won't watch it. Yeah, I was doing 55, 60 games a season, so I would have stretches in the season where there were maybe 2 or 3 games in a row that weren't televised, and I would just fly home to Chicago for the week and then come back. So that's the way I kind of managed that. And then in the off season is when I did those other gigs and tried to squeeze in some other work in some other sports. But eventually, as the NHL commitment became greater and greater, and the Sharks did more and more games, and now we've probably been doing all the games for the last 20 years. It's been pretty tough to do another sport, especially in this marketplace. I know, like in a place like New York, where it's more common for Kenny Albert to jump from doing a Ranger game on radio to maybe filling in and doing a Knicks game and then doing an NFL game on Sunday. Here, it's just not that easy to move around to the various different sports. And quite honestly, teams want identity. If you're the Sharks, you want the same TV announcers. You want your fans to recognize your guys. And that's the same for the soccer teams that I used to be involved with. Eventually, they wanted their face and their voice, and somebody who wasn't going to just take off because he had a hockey game he had to do. So that's how that worked. But yeah, for 8 years, I did that commute from Chicago to San Jose, put on a lot of frequent flyer miles, but certainly glad I don't have to do that anymore. Although Chicago still is the favorite place I've ever lived in.
Okay, well, that's all right. Well, another city I have to get to for sure. Now, in third period of our conversation here, I got to ask you this, because this is definitely with COVID going on. The last game for you was against Chicago, 6-2 loss, unfortunately, in Chicago. Best place you lived in. You were on your way, Dan was saying, to St. Louis, and you guys got the call that the season was over. Now, you obviously have been through a couple of losing seasons with the Sharks. Not many, obviously.
Yep.
The Cup final just a few years ago in the 25th season. So first off, it being a down year for the Sharks, and then this happens. And now that the return to play format will not include the Sharks, how difficult was it for you as a play-by-play broadcaster to end the season early, and just wondering that it came to a complete halt?
Yeah, it was very unusual, much different than in the past when we've had lockouts. Unfortunately, one season losing an entire year, and that's where you were kind of waiting, will we ever start? And it never did. And then the other lockouts where we resumed play in January after missing the autumn months. This one was bizarre because, as you noted, we were in Chicago, and I wasn't actually doing that game. That was an NBC game with Mike Emmerich and Eddie Olczyk, so I was just sitting in the press box. And then we got the word, like partway through the second period, that the NBA had decided to suspend their season because a player tested positive. All of a sudden, the wheels start churning, and you start wondering, oh my God, won't the NHL have to do the same thing? And we did go to St. Louis in case we played there that next day. And of course, we never did. Obviously, something that's never happened before in this way, not to me and not to any of us. So it was odd. And I think as it went into a month or so, it became apparent, at least to me, that we weren't going to be playing anymore, because if the NHL was to resume, it would be highly unlikely that they would try and play regular season games. So the season slowly came to a halt. But I'll be honest with you, I was looking forward to the end of the year because it was a tough season. The team never really got on track. They had one good stretch in November, but that was about it. We went through a coaching change. We went through a very active trade deadline period. We acquired Patrick Marleau in October, then traded him at the deadline. There was a lot of emotional things that went on with the team, a new captain trying to establish his footing with the C, Logan Couture, and then the ongoing kind of subplot of, is Joe Thornton nearing the end of it? Is this his last season? And we still don't know that. So there were a lot of things going on, but the thing that was going on more than anything was losing. And we weren't used to that. The Sharks have made the playoffs almost every year they've been in the NHL. I think they've missed it now maybe 5 times out of almost 30 years. So we were used to that level of success. And with the kind of team we had coming out of training camp, the expectation was very high that the Sharks were going to be a playoff team, if not a cup contender. I mean, they had gone to the conference final last spring against the Blues. So it was a very disappointing year, and it came to a very bizarre end, but maybe fitting for the kind of year it was. And hopefully that was a one-off, and the team can get turned around next season, whenever that is. And it looks like next season will probably be December.
Which is wild. And now that's another thing for you too, because that would be almost, let's say, a 9-month layoff, and something for you.
Could have had a baby.
Yeah, he could have. That's true. But now, in all seriousness, though, for you to have that lengthy layoff, do you feel that could potentially affect you in any way, or any chemistry, or that's really not?
I'll be honest with you. Every season, when we get ready to go back on the air, and we don't do preseason games, so our first telecast is a regular season game. I mean, you're nervous. Do I still know how to do this? Can I still put the words together? And that's an ongoing thing. That's a little stage fright, and there's nothing wrong with that. And your voice is a muscle. And when it's out of practice for a period of 5 or 6 months in a normal off season, those first 2 weeks of doing games, you feel it. You're a little sore until you get back into announcing shape of being able to talk for 2.5 hours nonstop. This will be longer. You're right. It'll be, if we go from March through, say, till December, that's going to be a 9-month layoff. So hopefully I've still got my fastball. We'll find out, but I'm going to pitch for us maybe doing a rehearsal game, even if it's just closed circuit before that, or do something to get myself ready, maybe watch some old games here at home and just call them with the sound turned down to get the pipes going again. But there's always that little bit of nervousness before every season starts, and this year will probably be no exception.
Yeah, I was going to say there's especially the muting the TV is the best thing for all you play-by-play broadcasters or aspiring broadcasters out there. I did
absolutely.
it. You have to do it to or move to a smaller city and get your reps, and you'll get there eventually. But let's go into a little bit of rapid fire here as we close out this little hour here that we have. Randy, first off, again, I want to say thank you for taking your time again. I see it's nice and sunny where you are. And here it's getting dark. So, for you to be inside when things are starting to open up, I really do appreciate it. And all of our, so again, now and there's so many to even think of. Your favorite call, your best call or favorite call in your time as the Sharks play-by-play guy.
April 1994, Game 7, Sharks versus the Detroit Red Wings. First time the Sharks had ever made the playoffs. Year 3, and that was coming off a year 2 when they went 11-71-2. There were 2 ties. It was before overtime. Year 3, they had Igor Larionov, Sergei Makarov, Artur Zerbe, and Game 7 in Detroit at the Joe Louis Arena. Jamie Baker scored in the third period with about 10 minutes to go. And that turned out to be the winning goal in one of the biggest upsets in Stanley Cup playoff history up to that time. And the Red Wings were the number 1 seed and the favorite to win the Cup that year. That's still my favorite call. My favorite game would be last year, Game 7 against the Vegas Golden Knights, when the Sharks scored all those goals during the 5-minute major penalty and shocked Vegas in Game 7. But those are the 2 favorites.
Yeah, I was gonna say now to go back to what we were talking about with making sure that you have to be a little unbiased on NBCSN, but with that game, with Game 7 for you, because obviously the first round, the regional action, you guys are able to still call that. Right. How was that? I think I heard you call it once, and I know I don't usually do it with anybody. I did have to hit volume down just a little bit. How was that for you live?
Well, it's hard to explain how unbelievable it was. But, to be down like that in the third period, with 10 minutes to go, down 3-0, and you get a 5-minute major penalty. And one of the rules of playoff hockey is if you get a 5-minute major, anything can happen because you can score power play goals at will. You can, the man doesn't come out of the box.
Right.
So it's 3-1. Then it's 3-2. Then it's 3-3. And it was, they finally tied it. Then they take the lead. This is all on the same power play.
Yep.
Well, I mean, the building was ready to just explode. And so was I. I mean, it was an incredibly emotional thing because when it's 3-0, I'll be honest with you, I'm starting to think about what I'm going to say during the handshake at the end of the game. You want to give Sharks fans hope for next year, but clearly they were beaten by a better team, Vegas, and maybe shut out in game 7 on home ice. So those are the kind of things I was thinking about. And then all of a sudden what happened. And then to go from leading 4-3 only to have Jonathan Marchessault tie it again with about 90 seconds to go in regulation and then send it to overtime. It was an absolutely emotional roller coaster of which I've never been on before, probably never will be again. And I haven't seen people hug, kiss, dance in the streets in San Jose ever before like they did that night. It was an incredible night.
Yeah, and for those that did not watch, Barclay Goodrow was the one to score that overtime goal. That one was absolutely insane. And I remember when I was watching it here late at night, that was really something. Now for you as a play-by-play man and to look up to someone like you, which I have, but for others that don't really know you, during these uncertain and rough times, not only in America, but also with the pandemic, shelter in place, New York pause out here on the East Coast, we have been told, obviously, to stay inside. Obviously, things are beginning to open up, but in the times past when we've heard, it's been raining outside or, we could go just for a little bit outside and come back in. For the aspiring broadcaster or athlete, what is your advice to them to make sure that, you can still do it amid everything that's going on?
Well, I think you touched on it, and especially for broadcasters that are trying to break in and maybe they're in college or maybe they're even still in high school and thinking this is what I want to do. I want to be a sportscaster. You have to get the words out of your mouth. You and I could maybe both agree that Syracuse has the best sports broadcast program in Division One. Bob Costas came from Syracuse, and there's a long list of accomplished broadcasters that came out of Syracuse. But you can graduate with an honors from Syracuse in sports broadcasting, but if you can't get the words out of your mouth and actually do a game, it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying don't go to college, please do, but you need practical experience. And anything you can do during this time, like turning down the sound on a game and doing your research ahead of time. And most of the games that are on right now are replays anyway, so the final score, what happened. You can prepare your charts and your information, knowing ahead of time what's going to happen. But getting the words out of your mouth is the key thing in this business. It takes reps. Very few people are good at it right out of the gate. Very few athletes who become color guys are good at it right out of the gate. Tony Romo is a freak because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he's already arguably the best color broadcaster in the NFL. That is an anomaly. Most of us have to get in our reps and get better at it and make our mistakes. And the only way you do that is by keeping on doing it. So any way you can keep doing it, you aspiring broadcasters out there, even though the team you might get to do when there's sports happening isn't in action right now, try and figure out a way to get some reps in. And even if it's doing a Zoom call like this, you're talking and you're doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do, as I said, that's one of the reasons why I started this. And as I did mention to you, is to stay fresh and to keep getting the words out of your mouth, whether it be either to stutter, you're still eventually getting it, getting it out. Now, who's the biggest inspiration in your life, hockey wise, that made you stay on course, going all the way back from your time calling dog sled races and all the way up to now as the voice of the San Jose Sharks?
Oh boy, there have been too many to just have one. At the very beginnings of my career, getting the opportunity to work with the Sharks, and even before the Sharks became an entity, Brian Burke, who has been an executive in the NHL for a long time, was working with the Vancouver Canucks back in those days as their assistant GM, and he was extremely helpful in helping our group further our desire to get a team for San Jose. And as I've been a broadcaster, he's always remembered special milestone moments in my career, and has always been made a point to, reach out at those times. And he's been an inspiration. Bob Miller, who I mentioned, I got to work with him with the LA Kings and then be a colleague of him for almost 30 years, a true inspiration, a real gentleman, but someone who learned how to have fun. One of the first producers I ever worked with, a New York-based producer, Mark Stolberger, who was on the old NHL broadcasts on USA Network when Al Trautwig and Gary Green were the broadcasters, and he became our producer for the Sharks for many years, was a big influence. And now I work with a tremendous producer, Sean Madison, very forward-thinking, very detailed, but also appreciates that we are a unique market and our fans want more than just hardcore nuts and bolts hockey. So I've had so many influences, so many people who have helped me along the way. And again, going back to how we started this, you can't really repay them all back for what they've done for you. The only thing you can do is pay it forward and help people who are trying to get the same thing done that you were a long time ago.
Yeah. It's the truth. Actually gave me chills as you said that. That's really is to the point. So now Randy, I've asked this to everyone. I've asked this to your partner, Brett Hedican. I've asked this to your radio counterpart, Dan Rusanowski. And because obviously where you are in Northern California, summer has been there for, I don't know, all year round. For us here, obviously, summer is just beginning. Unofficially, I believe in a few days, in 6 days. So with that being said, we've asked all 22 guests now, including yourself, what their favorite ice cream is. So I'm assuming you can probably figure out what Brett Hedican's is, or even Dan Rusanowski's is. Do you have any idea, or possibly?
I know, I am pretty sure that Dan Rusanowski's favorite ice cream is vanilla.
Okay, there you go. That's good. Absolutely. And possibly the second one for him, because he gave two.
Could be chocolate. I don't know, but I'm a strawberry ice cream guy. I do deviate though, and my flavor range when it comes to treats has been expanded. My girlfriend owns a cupcake bakery, and she won Cupcake Wars on the Food Network a number of years ago. So I get to taste her award-winning products on a regular basis. So even though strawberry sounds boring, I am expanding my taste buds each and every day, and my waistline if I eat too many cupcakes.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, so strawberry. So that's good, because what we got from Brett was Americone from Ben and Jerry's, and he was the only one that gave us an exact thing or exact flavor from a specific ice cream parlor. So that's pretty good. So strawberry, we'll put that down. Now you were just talking about the cupcake business. We've seen on social media, Randy, that you've been doing some deliveries as well.
Yes. That is my side hustle now. I am a part-time cupcake delivery guy. So it's 6 days a week. I work from about 9 to noon, and just helping her out because it's been a tough time to keep employees employed and things like that. So I'm just doing it for fun. It's a blast. I've met a lot of fun people, and also got to know my area. This is San Jose is a big area. A lot of East Coast people probably wouldn't recognize that it's bigger than San Francisco in population. It's the third biggest city in California behind LA and San Diego. So this is a vast region. And I'm getting to know a lot of it, the side streets, the neighborhoods, the shortcuts. So it's been fun.
30 years later, that's pretty good. You know, you're especially now, you know, now is the time to really start doing things that you weren't able to do in your off season, if you will. One final question, Randy. So obviously you've been doing You've been the cupcake delivery man. You've been the Uber Eats, if you will, for some. And is there anything that else you've been catching up on that you've wanted to, during your normal off season, or something that you normally wouldn't be doing when the world is normally spinning?
Well, I know we were very late to this dance, but I had not gotten into the Game of Thrones thing when it was actually on HBO as a weekly thing. Maybe I'm so preconditioned by the way Netflix just dumps whole series at once that I was more comfortable watching it at one time. But we ended up watching all of Game of Thrones at the beginning of the COVID pause. So that was something that I wanted to do and was glad I did it. It was absolutely phenomenal and probably the best produced television I've ever seen. Got caught. My girlfriend had not seen Ozark. I had seen the first 2 seasons, but not the third. So we watched it from season 1 all over again. And that was fabulous. And I actually just bought a house last week, so I'll be moving. So the timing is kind of good that I'm not up to my elbows in hockey stuff right now, giving me an opportunity to focus some time on that. And, even though the shelter in place has hampered that, spending a little more time with my kids when I've been able to, things like that, tried a puzzle, and I went for the 1,000-piece puzzle, and that lasted for about 15 minutes. Maybe I have short attention span millennial disease too, but I just shoved it under the bed. So I won't be doing any more puzzles probably for the time going forward. So if anybody wants a good deal on a puzzle, I'll mail it to you.
That's fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the voice of the San Jose Sharks, Randy Hahn. Randy, I really appreciate you again taking the time this whole hour. It went really fast. Really fun to chat with you. Someone again who I've looked up to for surprisingly, again, what are we in 2020? So about 12 years now. Ever since I knew I wanted to do this. So it's been an honor to chat with you, sir. And I really look forward to meeting you officially next time you're out here on Long Island, hopefully next year.
Yeah, I look forward to that too. Hopefully we'll be traveling, and best of luck to what you're doing this on this podcast and everything else going forward. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. So before you do go, just want to say one, just closing credits. We're going to have episode number 7 of the Essential Wrestling Podcast tomorrow night, Tuesday, June 16th, starting at 6 p.m. Join Tyler Adele and Al Carl. They'll be bringing you all the up-to-date wrestling things. And also the next episode of this podcast, episode number 23 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series, we will have the Atlanta Hawks play-by-play man, Bob Rathbun, with us starting at 6 p.m. Thursday, June 18th. Ladies and gentlemen, one last time, for Randy Hahn, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We'll see you next time. All right. Randy, Mr. Hahn, I really do appreciate you taking the time again. And